Here on this channel, we don't just like older women, we love older women. So when I pulled up the GCX and saw low men rocking this shirt, I knew we had to make it real. These shirts were launched last month, and you guys have been so supportive. We've even surpassed our donation goal. Every purchase supports Cougar Conservancy across the United States, which is important because if we're not careful, we run the risk of cougars disappearing forever. Beauty may last a lifetime. These shirts are only available for a limited time. So if you'd like to show your appreciation for older women, and even support a good cause, there'll be a link down below that'll take you directly to these shirts. No lie, I bet many of you forgot this exotic even existed. The pre-order exotic kinetic sniper rifle, New Land Beyond, which is essentially No Land Beyond, which we have a ton of history with. This was a Destiny 1 exotic that, no lie, at one point terrorized the entire Crucible. Now though, it's kind of become more of a PvE sniper. Yes, it's pretty good inside of PvP. We've played with it before. It could snack some headshots, but Bungie's actually turned it into a monster inside of PvE. And they've also brought us a catalyst with the launch of Edge of Fate. Today, guys, we're going to be looking at New Land Beyond. We're going to be going over its damage, how it looks in this current sandbox, what its catalyst does, and then we're going to be comparing across the board to all of our other sniper rifles, most notably our other exotics. Now, before we get into that, I do want to bring up the biggest difference between the Destiny 1 version of the sniper rifle and the Destiny 2 version. You see, in Destiny 1, this weapon used primary ammo. It was our only primary ammo sniper rifle, whereas in Destiny 2, it now takes special ammo, obviously for balance reasons, but it also means it does a lot more damage inside of things like PvE, and it's able to hold a ton of ammo with a total capacity of 40 at base. Now, this weapon comes with the exotic trait Bullseye Bolster, which reads landing a precision hit substantially increases this weapon's target acquisition, its handling, its reload speed, and stability for a short duration of time. Now, this is a pretty substantial buff. As you can see in the game at base, the rechamber looks like this is allowing you to fire every 1.8 seconds, but with Bullseye, this decreases this down to 1.5 seconds. Now, this rechambering speed can also be increased with kinetic loader mods. Another thing to note is that you can perform a reload cancel during the rechamber animation, which can increase your rate of fire. I know normally cancel and reload animations still require you to sit there during the delay. The easiest way to do it is just wait for the clink sound and then sprint, and that will cancel the animation. Now, I will say, for the sake of just testing things in this video, I was not reload canceling. We were going through the entire animation. There's also just so many ways you can just increase reload speed all on its own, which is what we really leaned into throughout this testing. Then we have our exotic perk, the Master. This reads that scoring precision hits increases this weapon's damage until the wielder's defeat. It also massively increases ammo reserves. So right here, guys, each precision hit landed will grant you 1 stack of the Master, increasing your weapon damage at each stack. Now, this can stack up all the way to get this 100. But I want to mention here, the biggest jump you're going to see in damage is between 0 stacks to 5 stacks. Starting at 1 stack, this increases our damage by 15.7%, with that 5 stacks reaching 35%. So just at 5 stacks, this is a stronger damage buff than bait and switch. But this is where it gets better. At times 10, this increases our damage to 49.5%. At times 15, it goes to 60.7%. And then at times 20, it goes up to a whopping 70% increased damage. Now, this will also change the text in the bottom left hand of your screen from Master to the Grandmaster. It also adds an explosion effect to shots, which strangely enough is just purely visual. And as mentioned previously, this can stack all the way up to times 100, which then would change the text to say the Grander Master. Oh yeah, what's better than Grandmaster? Grander Master. Now, while this is a cool little Easter egg, I will say it barely provides any additional benefits. You're only increasing your damage from 20 stacks to 100 by only 3%. You heard that right. 3%. You go from 70% to 73%. Now, one thing I really do like about this buff is that the stacks persist. So long as you don't die, you will keep these stacks of damage. Even if you happen to stow the weapon, you'll still keep the stacks. So you can literally go into an activity, land precision hits, get to those 20 stacks, and then just run around doing 70% more damage. But this takes us to our exotic catalyst. This is called Top Tier Mastery, and it should be acquirable when you boot up Edge of Fate from either Banshee or the Special Orders kiosk. The description reads, while this weapon is at high stacks of Master, new rounds are continually loaded into the magazine, and the benefits from Bullseye's Bolster last longer. Now, starting with the second half first, this increases how long Bullseye Bolster will last for. And I will say it was a bit difficult to test since there isn't a visual indicator for it even being active. But it seems like Bullseye Bolster lasts for around 3 seconds. Now, onto the first half. This says that rounds will continually be loaded into the magazine. Now, no lie, Personally, I thought this was going to be similar to something like third iteration, which very slowly reloads rounds into the mag. However, we were pleasantly surprised to find that this is not the case at all. You see, upon reaching 20 stacks, this automatically reloads your weapon completely from reserves. Then every subsequent shot after that will pull directly from your reserves, meaning you never even have to reload. Now, this is great because it solves one of the main problems with New Land Beyond, and that was the need to reload the weapon after every 8 shots. Now, while the rechambering is still there, removing that reload altogether is huge. Also, we want to mention that this seems to have a pretty fun bug associated with it. You see, if you shoot the weapon when at 20 stacks while your Guardian is mantling, this happens. Yes, you're seeing this correctly, guys. You're literally able to shoot out 3 to maybe 7 shots at once, which is a bit crazy, and it only happens when you mantle. Now, I'm not saying you need to go out there and DPS this way, mantling from a platform on and off. Without a doubt, not practical whatsoever. Plus, you lose the ability to aim your weapon. What it further proves is that Destiny truly is running on spaghetti code. But now let's take a look at its total damage and DPS compared to our other sniper rifles. For all the testing, we used Greg here in the shooting range, and all tests were done below 100 weapon stats, just to keep everything on a level playing field. However, do keep in mind, with the new featured and new gear bonus, some weapons don't fall under this umbrella. For example, both New Land Beyond and Whisper are featured weapons, so they get the 10% damage bonus, but weapons like Darcy does not. Now, when we take a look at New Land Beyond, at base, starting at 0 stacks, we get a total damage of 10,889 for 1 magazine, with a DPS value of 1,028. Then starting at 0 stacks, but now shooting all 40 shots, this gives us 68,329 total damage, with a DPS value of 1,074. So lots of total damage, but keep in mind, this takes a while to fire all these shots, clocking in at 1 minute and 3 seconds. Now, if we look at the values, but this time starting at times 20 instead. Again, proccing this catalyst and that 70% damage buff out the gate. With 1 mag, that being 8 shots, we get a total damage of 14,817, with our DPS being kicked up to 1,411. Now, for the full 40 shots starting at times 20, we get a total damage of 74,785 with a DPS of 1,263. This being slightly quicker to fire off all 40 shots at 58.6 seconds. Now, I wanted to compare this to a very popular legendary sniper rifle, Praedynt's Revenge. This specific role had kinetic tremors and elemental honing, giving us a 1 mag total of 4,883 with a DPS value of 1,449. Then dumping all of our ammo with time loss magazine, we were able to get that total damage up to 20,319 with a DPS of 1,029. Now, if we compare this to some of our other exotic sniper rifles, we've got Whisper the Worm, which is arguably the king of total damage. This one comes in at a total damage of 49,742 and a DPS value of 1,472 over 33.5 seconds, further showcasing just how impressive No Land Beyond's damage and DPS is. Now, if we look at Cloud Strike, this gives us a total damage of 25,053 with a DPS of just 800 over 32 seconds. Next, we have Icebreaker. I know most people don't use Icebreaker for DPS, but we're going to include it anyways here, especially considering this season we have artifact mods leading into stasis. But with Icebreaker and a Dust Fill to get that extra ignition damage, this gives us a total damage of 15,590 and a DPS value of 1,004 over 14.4 seconds. Now, lastly, we have Darcy, a notoriously memed on weapon that has seen a number of changes, including being able to jolt on every hit, plus its exotic catalyst essentially turns it into a sniper rifle equivalent to Galahorn, buffing legendary snipers. Now, the buff here called networked targeting also applies to Darcy itself, granting it a 15% damage buff if you're actively sharing the buff with other allies. So with Darcy and an ally present, we get a total damage value of 28,496 and a DPS value of 1,059 over 26.5 seconds. So when you take a look at the raw damage, New Land certainly puts out and even keeps up in the DPS department. Not to mention that this is a special weapon, and similar to rocket sidearms, it holds a ton of ammo, so you can kind of run around and almost main it as a primary weapon, and hell, even in some cases utilize it as an option for double special. I know it's a crazy thing to be telling you guys that this is a good sniper rifle for PvE, especially if you're a Destiny 1 player. In your mind, this should only be a sniper rifle utilized inside of PvP, but the opposite is true now. This sniper rifle 1,000% puts out inside of PvP, and even beyond that. Keep in mind, mind, with it being a kinetic weapon, you could utilize this with certain armor sets. Think no further than the TechSec armor set. The 2-piece record bonus reads that you deal significantly increased kinetic damage to combatant shields, overshields, vehicles, and constructs. Guys, against elemental shields, which has always been the bane of kinetic weapons, your kinetic weapons with this armor set goes up a whopping 200%. And against things like brigs and tanks, those enemies that count as vehicles, you don't do 200% more damage to them, as that would be crazy. At the same time, I would love it, but it's a 15% damage buff instead. Now, you can take this a step further and utilize the 4-piece set of this, where defeating powerful combatants or breaking a combatant's shield with kinetic damage releases a disorienting kinetic shockwave. And you can see it in action right here. When we hit this major, that shockwave procs disorienting, which will tag the enemies nearby and include additional damage. The main thing to take away from this, guys, is that it's beautiful for dealing with all shields. Literally every shield in the game makes your kinetic weapon a monster. And we talked about this for Giver's Blessing, but it's even more so here for No Land Beyond. Now, the other piece of armor we messed around with was Chromatic Fire on Warlock. This comes with Crystalline Transistor, which reads that precision final blows from kinetic weapons create an explosion in the element of your equipped super and apply an elemental effect. For instance, Arc blinds, Solar scorches, Void weakens, Stasis slows, and Strand severs. What I like about this is that despite this not being a strand weapon, you can rock Strand with Chromatic Fire, lean into that, proc sever, kill those enemies, and proc a number of different artifact perks that also lean into Strand. Now, this also has the added benefit, if paired with the Strand super, to synergize with the Tangled Web artifact mod. This mod makes it so that when you create a tangle, it suspends enemies in a small radius around it. Now, this works in combination with Chromatic Fire because it allows you to sever enemies in a radius on precision kills. And as a result, a tangle is created and allows for the immediate suspend. So in conclusion, the Catalyst makes this gun much better, especially after those 20 stacks. It is a mini boss buster, a major buster, a champion buster. And with us having access to things like Unstoppable Sniper Rifle, this weapon will not only have the ability to stun Unstoppables, but also have the ability to be overcharged, netting you even more damage. This is a weapon worth going out of your way for when it comes to landing those precision hits. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.